Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Political Fixer Live. I'm your host this evening, the hostess with the mostest. I'm Shauna Presley Vircher, and I got to tell you, we were up to the last second. The ink is not even dry on some of these stories that we're going to be talking about tonight. So much to cover. So many different things happening at once, and we're going to try to put some sort of context around it so that we don't all go mad. All right. So, if you've never joined us before for an episode of Political Fixer Live, first of all, welcome. Secondly, you can participate. This is your show too. So, the whole point of the time together is to try to sort through some of the top stories, either the most widely reported stories, or in a lot of cases, stories that we feel like actually should have gotten more coverage. And that's definitely the case for some of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to ask you to weigh in. What do you think? What are your questions? What are your thoughts about what we're talking about? And we've got our amazing political fixer family, the community that we have built over the last year or so. Actually, let's say almost a year and 3 months that we've been doing this together, folks. And our political fixer family is amazing. So a lot of them are going to jump in and help you understand or offer discussion and support as well. It's a really great community. So we're happy to have you. All right, what are the topics today? We are going to talk about some pretty disturbing trends that we are seeing. We hit a little bit of a tipping point this week, and if you didn't feel it, we're going to stop for a second, rewind the proverbial tape, and discuss what moment we just passed, possibly without realizing it. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. We have some positive news to report that's a little bit shocking, to be honest, if you follow politics at all. Are the Democrats actually winning a messaging war? That's not, seems like it hasn't happened since the aughts, but we actually have some positive news to report on some pretty serious, high stakes stuff. So it's good to see that now we're finally starting to turn the season around, as it were. And, before we do all of that, and we get into a lot of the news stories, that the disturbing trends and also the messaging wars, we're going to dive right in to what I think should have been the top story of the week, and yet it was a blip, barely a whisper. If I hadn't been so compulsively online, I myself would have missed it. Okay, so let's dive in. We're already at over 1,000 likes. Good evening to so many of our political fixer family members. And before we go, I would be remiss if, per usual, I did not take the time to not just thank all of our regular family members. I see Kelly's online. We see new members here like Susan. Is it Stajabakam? Is on here. I see Kelly McGrath is on here. So to all of you who are on here that are our regular political fixer family members, and all of you that give us the gifts and the likes to keep going, we thank you. This is going to be one of those times we're going to need that encouragement. So hold that positivity. For those of you that are old enough to remember the threat level scale after September 11th, do any of you remember that this was a fixture on news stations? There was a threat level scale, it was color coded, and it was literally, what color of terrorism threat are we under today, people, right? And it felt like everything in news coverage for years after September 11th centered around that color coded scale. Well, we are definitely at threat level orange, but unfortunately, if you listen to Hegseth, the enemies are now within, and they are us. So the threat is to democracy. Let me explain. 47 says a lot of depressing and distressing things. Too many to even parse, because one paragraph of just garbled text could have 18 really unsettling components to it. But there were two words that 47 uttered this week, multiple times, that I think should have put us up to the proverbial threat level orange. He was speaking to reporters, and 47 said, quote, that he is open to invoking the Insurrection Act. This was in response to his ability to deploy the National Guard to cities like Portland and Chicago. So I want to take a second and give you some context to this, because again, we are living in just crazy time. So why these two words are so important. So let's just take a second and talk about this Insurrection Act. What is it and why am I spending time on this? All right. This is why I believe your concern should be heightened, and just don't worry, this is not going to be a boring government lesson. In fact, are any of you Hamilton fans? Did any of you see the show on either Broadway or in your cities or even on Disney Plus or other places it was streamed? Did you see the musical Hamilton? Because we're about to talk about a really dark, true sequel essentially to Hamilton. You're going to recognize some of these names. All right. So let's go back. It's the end of Hamilton. Spoiler alert for those of you that have not seen it. There is a duel. It happened in 1804, and Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton had their infamous duel in New Jersey because everything is legal in Jersey. Anyway, so I promise you I'll stop quoting it, but it's hard. It's like a tick. Anyway, so Hamilton was wounded in that duel by Aaron Burr, and he passed away the next day. Now, that is when the curtain comes down in Hamilton. Let's bring it back up for the sequel. What happens after Hamilton is shot by Aaron Burr? I will tell you. Burr goes back and his political reputation is completely eviscerated. So he's like, yeah, I won. And everybody's like, what did you just do? So he has completely squandered any attempts that he had. Keep in mind, Aaron Burr was a vice president. He was running for president. He was at the top of his game. This happens, and now he is completely ostracized by the political community, right? He actually leaves DC, and so he doesn't go away quietly. Aaron Burr starts all of these comeback schemes. I want you to picture like a villain, like you haven't heard the last of me, right? These types of schemes start popping up, and he starts trying to cause trouble for the United States government because it's personal for him at this point, right? So in around 1806, about 2 years after the infamous duel, then Aaron Burr starts plotting with different private army members that he has assembled. Basically, the rumor is, and they've got a couple of letters that have been traded back and forth. The rumor is that Aaron Burr is going to seize some of the Western territories or maybe try to form his own country or his own state. He wants to take things over with his own kind of private army. So this is so bad that he was actually tried for treason, but he was acquitted because they could show that he was talking about it, that he was thinking about it, but had he done enough to rise to the level of treason? No. So they couldn't really lock him up at that point in time. But Thomas Jefferson wanted to make sure that this couldn't happen to their brand new baby union, right? And so he wanted to make sure that he had the ability to use the military inside the United States against someone like an Aaron Burr or his put together, militia group if there were threats within our borders that threatened our national security. Because before, it was really about protecting from the enemies outside of the border, right? So basically, in 1807, they got together and said, listen, we can't have this Aaron Burr type situation popping up and not be able to shut it down. Our hands were tied legally. Let's pass a new law. So they did. It was called the Insurrection Act, and it allows a U.S. president to deploy active duty military or federalized National Guard troops within our borders for specific purposes. Insurrections, violence within our borders that places our residents in harm's way, unlawful assembly of different armies with threats to the United States, or conspiracies to overthrow the government. All right. Give you some context here. That is why the Insurrection Act was first formed. It was not needed at that time. In fact, it's only been used a few times throughout our entire history. It was used in 1957, by Eisenhower in Little Rock, Arkansas, to enforce the desegregation orders and to protect Black students trying to enter campuses from the violent mobs that were threatening them. So that was the first use of the Insurrection Act. Second use, Kennedy in the early 1960s in Mississippi and Alabama to protect the civil rights marchers, to make sure that they were given their First Amendment rights to protest, but also that the integration orders by federal courts were actually being honored. Then in 68, President Johnson dispatched and he deployed troops under the Insurrection Act following the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination, because there were riots across the country and the cities said they were overwhelmed and actually asked for assistance. And then in 1992, under George H.W. Bush, after the Los Angeles ruling, the Rodney King verdict, California again requested assistance. And so the Insurrection Act allowed people to come in, the troops to come in and help with that. Now, I understand that some of these historic moments and the use of troops during them can be controversial. But I think that we could all agree that overall, the idea, the good faith argument behind the Insurrection Act before today was that it's there to protect citizens, to move the law forward, to make sure that the law is obeyed. And that is a key difference here, because we're no longer looking at your mother's Insurrection Act. We are in a new time and a new day. There is this idea that 47 is putting forward that these cities like Chicago and Portland are completely dangerous and they are completely overrun. And so they are going to accept National Guard and troop help, whether they like it or not. First of all, let's lay some facts on that nonsense. Let's look at Chicago, right? Because it's easy. We all have propaganda shows on commercial and on, HBO, CBS all the time, right? It's easy to think that that's true. Violence exists in almost every place in our country, but some context. The idea that Chicago is under siege or that the violent crime rate is even increasing is an outright lie. In fact, I want to get this number right. Chicago's homicide rate has plummeted 65% over the last 5 years. And in fact, if you were to compare it to other cities in the United States, there are over 24 cities that rank higher than Chicago when you are comparing acts of violence per capita. And, you know, if you're looking at those cities, a good deal of them are in MAGA controlled states. So this is completely something that is not based in fact. What it is having to do with is this happens to be a democratically controlled city in Chicago by a Democratic controlled government in Illinois with Governor Pritzker. And he just doesn't like certain types of people that look a certain type of way. And he wants to use some force surrounding it to keep them in line. This is what this is about. And 47 and his minions are going into these communities and they're stirring up this civil unrest so that they can then point to it and say, oh, look, unrest. This is why we're here. It's this very backwards logic. But let me put it even simpler. The Insurrection Act was basically an in case of emergency, break glass and use this fire extinguisher to put out the fire. That's what it was intended to do. But what 47 is doing is starting a fire so he has an excuse to reach in and use the fire extinguisher against his own citizens, the enemies within. I guess that includes me. I mean, living in a blue city, yes, in a red state, I guess that also includes me. There's some good news here, and I definitely want to hear from you all on this topic because I think this is a very important subject, and I feel like we are not talking, the news is not covering this nearly enough. The good news is U.S. District Judge, appointed by 47, by the way, Karen Emergut, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her last name. I've heard it pronounced Gut and Gut, issued a temporary restraining order in the case of Portland because Oregon was saying, we don't want your troops. We don't want you to use our National Guard against our citizens. Thank you very much. They filed and they were granted a temporary restraining order because the judge, again, this is a 47 appointed judge, said there was insufficient evidence of any rebellion or threat, and that this idea that protest activity in Portland existed did not rise to the level needed to justify military intervention. And let me tell you what happened. They got cute. They're like, oh, so you won't let us use the Portland National Guard. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the California National Guard and the Texas National Guard. All right, because you said Portland. So we're going to use Texas and California. Okay, cool, cool. Not cool. They called an emergency hearing last night, and I read the transcripts. I was driving back from another event. I had done a training last night. That judge was not amused. She literally said to the other attorney, you need to remember that you are an officer of the court. I'm not an attorney, but I read a lot of transcripts and watch a lot of trials because of my job. It is not good when a judge says, you need to remember your job as an attorney. That is not a good sign. So she issued another temporary restraining order. You might see it referred to as a TRO. That's like, okay, just to make myself clear, you can use no guard troops for now in Oregon, in Oregon, and specifically in Portland. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how this story, but first, I'm seeing so many different comments here. I want to take some of them now. First of all, I want to shout out Divine AF Girl, Marlene ML, and so many of our Political Fixer family members. I see a lot of gifters as well, and also I want to thank Janet64 for sharing the live. Thank you so much. And we're already at almost 13,000 likes on the Insurrection Act. My first question for you is this, before I give you a little bit more context on some things that happened, because it somehow got even darker this week. Were you aware of the Insurrection Act before? Is this something you were expected? And based on either the knowledge you already had before or the knowledge you're receiving now, what are your thoughts? Is this something that we should be worried about? Or is this just 47 saying nonsense like he always says nonsense? What are your thoughts? And thank you for sending me the donut on TikTok. I don't know what that is, but you just made me hungry, Penelope R. So I appreciate that. So I see Aunt Molly is saying yes. I see Square Foot Gardening for You is saying yes, it is something we should be concerned about. And Kizra is saying yes, we should be worried. Marlena said there's been hearing threats about this from 47 for a while. 33 Ellie 33 is saying almost a palindrome, Ellie, saying definitely concerned. Love the little tree. Catherine is saying that we need to be focused. Shirley is bringing up a really great point. Shirley Crenshaw Chandra is saying we should be worried, but people need to be educated about this. What a great point, because I'll say that I didn't understand all of it until I started doing some reading. Hopefully my Hamilton little skit helped some of you get some context on not just what the law is, but what it was intended for, but any content that any of you could create. And I'm happy to amplify it to share this with your audiences. What happened, what was said. The clip is out there, 47. Again, I'm going to read the quote for you. He says that he would consider the invoking the Insurrection Act to be able to deploy National Guard troops. And so you could explain what happened. You could explain what it is, the limited times that we have used it in history, and why we should be concerned now. What the concern is about abuse. Let me give you a little bit more context on this too, because some people could say, oh, Chicago does have crime. And so if he can be helpful, maybe that's what he's trying to do. If you are tempted to be that generous in your assessment of this man and his intentions, and first of all, bless your heart. But let me tell you something else that happened this week. All right. Stephen Miller, our zombie in human skin that receives a tax-paying paycheck. Stephen Miller was interviewed by CNN about this ruling by the judge with the temporary restraining orders. And he started talking about how we're going to file an appeal. This will not stand. We will have our National Guard troops and their little dogs too, presumably. Anyway, I'm going to read you a quote from that interview from Stephen Miller, who was talking live on the air on CNN. He says, under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority. And then he stops. He stops mid-sentence. He just blinks for several seconds. So the video isn't frozen. His lips aren't moving. So it's not an audio issue. It was as if he realized in that moment what was possibly a very rare mistake by Stephen Miller. Say what you will about this guy, and I do, but he is extremely disciplined. He's very disciplined with his message. The word here, the two words, we had Insurrection Act, but now we have plenary authority. Okay, let me explain. This one's easier. Title 10, what he was referring to, does exist. It governs our defense, our how you can use the military and how you cannot use them. And there is an authority to use the military. There is nothing, no such thing in any of our laws, anywhere, that says plenary authority. Why? Because plenary means total authority without limits. No one can stop you. And it is the great Project 2025 dictatorship in waiting mecca. It is what they want. It is the brass ring of authoritarianism, declaring complete control with absolutely no oversight. Unlimited power, not constitutional leadership. Plenary authority, not trying to reduce crime or prevent violence. Absolute unchecked power. That is the goal. Some of us knew this from Project 2025, but they have lied. They have danced around it. They have, created just enough cover under these distractions and smoke and tweaking and parsing sentences. And no, it's just a coincidence that all of these people who work for us also wrote Project 2025 until this moment when Stephen Miller said, we have plenary, we have total authority, above the law, complete authority. Shirley is saying, this little man, shake my head. Yes, absolutely. So Serene says, do you think it wasn't an oopsie? It was intentional. I'll tell you, Serene, I watched the clip many times after reading the transcript. The fact that he stopped mid-sentence, I think it was what we would refer to as a Freudian slip. I think he meant to talk about the authority under Title 10 of using the military, the authority of military force. And I think it was a Freudian slip. I think he made a mistake. It was an accidental moment of truth. Aunt Molly says, oopsie, better way to put it, right? Kizzer says, so you saw it, it felt like an accident, right? Miller said something very similar just weeks into his first term. I agree. I feel like Miller has just been drooling, like, I don't know, the unicorn blood or whatever he feasts on normally, right? He's just been drooling that, waiting for this moment. And he kept trying to go in the first term. But then there was all these pesky people saying, no, obey the Constitution, right? They got rid of all those people. And now they're persecuting some of them, right? And so now they've just got all of these yes people, or worse, people that are actually like really excited for this type of dark thing to happen, right? So lots of scary stuff here. Here's what I want to pose for conversation before we pivot to the next topic, because I do want to pick it up. We do have a positive story that I want to take us to soon. My question for you is this. There's back and forth. I see governors like Newsom and Pritzker and the governor of Oregon. I see these people fighting every way they know how to fight. If you were to hear that National Guard troops or what have you, something similar, were going to be beefed up and armed up and sent to your town or your city, what would you want to see your mayor or your governor do? What are some things that you feel like they're not doing, or what are some things that you're seeing that are working that you wish more communities would do? Square Foot Gardening for You says people are more frightened about it and more hesitant to join protests now. That is 100% true, Square Foot Gardening for You. And we're going to talk more about that fear-based strategy in just a little bit. You're in my head as usual, Square Foot. Aunt Molly says, where the H are the Republicans? Such a good question. Because we have quotes from Kristi Noem herself saying how deploying National Guards without their permission into other states is a complete violation of the Constitution. But that's before she was paid and propped up to do just the opposite, right? So we are not seeing any pushback from them as of yet. I don't know what it will take for that to happen. I'm reading more of your comments. Oya says, I need Newsom to do more planning and yes, yapping. I like Pritzker a lot. Listen, if you're in California, let me give you some important information. Early ballots just went out regarding this November referendum in California. to fight back against the gerrymandering and everything happening in Texas. Then California is saying they're going to do their own redistricting to try to get back those Democratic seats. So that's happening right now. So I do think some of that is important in fighting back. But to your bigger point, oh yeah, there is a lot of, stunting and smack talking, and maybe not as much, hey, let me keep my troops safe and keep them from being deployed. um I see that no one faces consequences for their misdeeds. No one is safe. Chris Ghost Honey is saying, I do feel like part of this is to make us feel less safe. We're going to talk about more of that later. Hazel NYC talking about the Mamdani race. Definitely, we're seeing him stand up to a lot of those threats. I think that's an excellent, great example. It'll be interesting to see if he makes it across the finish line as strongly as the polls are suggesting. Mariansky does not like Newsom, says he has to go. Good news. And listen, I could make fun of Gavin Newsom all night, but let me just say this. He's termed out. Hopefully you'll have some great choices. I think he serves a purpose. Is he my flavor? No, but we need allies of a lot of different shapes and sizes right now, right? So I get your bigger point, right? Okay, so I also see something. Mark Ramos is asking, how about a hearing today? Mark, I'm not familiar with that. We've been in meetings and also production meetings all day. So if you want to share some of that with the group, we'd love to see it. Feel free to share a link. Feel free to send us information here in the chat. Would love what you're referring to, since you seem to have more information, more current information. We'd love to have it. Okay, so that's a little bit of a darker story. We're going to circle back to the fear-based stuff in just a bit, but let's move on to our second story about Democrats actually possibly winning a messaging war. We're going to talk about that in just a second. First, I see that we're already at 23,000 likes on this lovely Tuesday evening. So for those of you that are just joining us, welcome to Political Fixer Live. We're here almost every Tuesday talking about some of the top stories. Some of them are the things that all of us are talking about. Some of them we honestly think aren't getting enough coverage, but welcome to the Political Fixer family. We're happy to have you. Our community is amazing, and they're here, and we're here to hear your feedback, your questions about the topics and other stuff throughout the show. I also want to thank Penelope R. and Catherine, in addition to Marlene and Divine AF Girl, for supporting us with these gifts. That's amazing. And also I see that apparently we have new things that are quests unlocked in our fan club. Again, I do not know what that means, TikTok universe, but we love you for it. And at some point, I promise I will study the TikTok universe and understand and appreciate you even more. But that is amazing. I want to cover a couple more comments on this story before we move forward. Dana Dew says, trying to get citizens used to militarized cities and towns is bad. Absolutely. Lowe's Addict James says, any upcoming ballots in Tennessee? I do not know of any particular things in Memphis or in Tennessee, where I understand that a lot of this stuff is also happening. But what I will tell you is, if you're looking for up to the minute coverage that goes federal on down to municipality, like school board races, you should keep an eye on. I would highly, highly, highly recommend Bolts Magazine, BOLTS. You can read their stuff online for free, though we encourage you to support them. We don't get paid, that we are not sponsored or asked to do that, but we use them in show prep all the time. This team is dedicated to finding races in all 50 states that impact us. And then what I love about them is you could have no understanding of what's going on. Like, you could be from California and not really understand New York politics, and they take time to explain how it works and why you should care, whether it's social justice or voting access or environmental or whatever you're into. So that's my recommendation for you. Can't say enough about Bolts Magazine. Please support independent journalists in general as you can. Okay. All right. So I see a question from, what is this fresh hell you stole? It's official. That is one of the best handles I've seen. How long can Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, stall swearing in the new Democratic Congresswoman from Arizona is who you're talking about? That's a great point. We've covered this story, and I will tell you that I believe this is one of the reasons. We've talked about this on the show for the last couple of weeks. We believe this is one of the reasons that Congress is delaying its session. They're not scheduled to come back into full session until October 13th now. They keep kicking that can. And for those of you that have not joined our earlier episodes, definitely you're going to want to stay on top of this story because it's not just a constitutional crisis of ignoring the will of the voters. So cute. A constitutional crisis. We're so used to that, sadly, by now. But it goes deeper than that in the fact that this particular congresswoman, or soon to be congresswoman, promised to be the 218th signature on the Epstein petition to compel the Department of Justice to release those files. So keep an eye on that story. I think it's extremely important. Reporters did ask Johnson about him tap dancing around and not swearing her in, and he was like, "Oh no, it's basically like it's a scheduling conflict. Have her people call my people." It was not exactly what he said, but that was the gist. But that's a great question. And James is saying that Afton is trying to get elected, and he thinks the 7th District of Tennessee. I'll definitely get briefed on that race and circle back to you on that next week, James. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. All right, let's talk about some positive momentum before we go to our kind of dark story. I'm going to tell you, like, the final story is going to get a little PG-13. I just want to warn you, for those of you, we're going to mind our language and be mindful that some of you listen on the drive or when you're making dinner with kids in the room. So we're going to keep it PG, but it might get a little PG-13. But before we get into that, let's do some positivity here. Let's actually celebrate a little bit of a win. The shutdown is brutal, and intentionally so. Right now, the government being shut down means that I believe it's October 13th, but any of you who are veterans, correct me if I'm wrong, that our men and women in uniform are set to receive their next paychecks. If this government does not open up by then, they will go without paychecks. TSA agents are also supposedly either not getting paid or soon to miss a paycheck. So we're starting to see flight delays as people are not so keen to do free overtime at the very least. And that doesn't even count those who feel like they need to call in sick because they can't afford childcare, transportation, etc. for free right now, right? There's so many different services that are going to be negatively impacted. And the shutdown, that's exactly why Democrats were saying we're going to do everything we can to prevent this from happening. But the problem is the stakes are so high. We're going to talk more about some of the stuff going on around the country that they felt like they couldn't just let things stand. And out of everything going on in the entire nation, they chose one message and decided as a team to become extremely disciplined, centered around this one message, which is the rising costs of healthcare, the spike in healthcare premiums that's going to impact millions of people, force nursing homes and hospitals to close across the country in cities and towns, in red states and blue states. They were going to focus on this one really grave issue. And I will be the first to say it was infuriating. All right. This is one of those times that I was just, what are you doing? How are you still only talking about healthcare? But let me tell you, um, it's working. It is penetrating the dome of chaos, noise, and awfulness. As of today, we've got some new information about how people are viewing the shutdown. Very few humans want the government to be shut down. That is universal. However, whose fault is it? Is it matters because what it gives you is leverage when you're negotiating for what happens before the government reopens. That is why the messaging game is important. It's not about scoring points. It's not even really about the next election. It's about right now when they're negotiating who has the most leverage. And we've got some wind at our backs with this very important issue. So a new Washington Post poll, I verified it with other polls for those of you that follow the iffiness of the Washington Post lately. It shows that 47% of Americans blame 47 and congressional Republicans for the shutdown. 30% blame Democrats. So we got 47% and we've got 30%. So that's a pretty big spread for something like this, especially when not a lot of actual information reaches people. Also, similar deeper poll said, again, Washington Post, that if you're looking at independent voters, they are twice as likely to blame Republicans versus Democrats. Now, let me tell you why this matters if you're a Republican. Why should you care what some random poll says? Because if it is, in fact, a credible poll, and again, there have been multiple that have supported this information, if you're a member of Congress, then you are up for reelection almost 100% of the time. Unless you just got there in a special election, you're up for reelection. 100% of them. They get reelected every 2 years. And campaign season for 2026 is starting now. So these Republicans in districts that are even kind of close cannot afford for everyone to think that everything is their fault. And 17 points is a huge number in the world of politics. So you got 47% of people versus 30% of people. You're on the wrong side of that story. So that's one bit of momentum, but there's a couple of others. So we've got polling. The second bit of momentum, our media decided, albeit a little bit late and after it passed, to actually start covering what's in the big ugly bill. Welcome to the party, mainstream media. Meanwhile, the rest of us have been getting migraines for months, but that's okay. We welcome you. Okay, so they're starting to actually do breakdowns and media coverage about what was in this bill that passed and how it will impact everyday families, and not just reading about it. They're actually doing like big breakdowns of everything and the illustrations and the touch screens. And I want to tell you that CNN did this analysis just recently. They said that an older couple making $85,000 total a year will see their yearly medical insurance premiums jump from an average of $7,000 to $25,000. If you're making $85,000 a year and to get health care costs you $30,000 a year, that means that about 30% of your income, nearly one third, is going to try to stay alive and healthy. That is horrendous even by American standards. Now, I'm quoting CNN figures, so you can definitely check all those sources. There's different reliable sources that show you how your healthcare premiums might be impacted if they are going to be impacted. There's different congressional leaders and local leaders saying how your community might be impacted, different hospitals that are at the risk of closure if you want to look into that. But this is serious high stakes. There's not a lot of families that can withstand that type of hit, which means you're about to have millions of people not be able to afford health care at all. And that, again, horrendous even by our standards. And if you are close to a window right now, you might want to look outside and see if there's a few pigs that are flying by, because I'm telling you, something weird is happening right now. We have a new ally in this congressional fight. And yes, I verified this. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I know. Okay. This is the second time I have had to agree with something that this woman said. And this alone is enough for me to hate this timeline that we're on. Okay. So I'm not going to read you her whole post that she placed, but this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not a big fan of Obamacare, da, 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 da. But I'm going to go against everyone on this issue because when the tax credits expire this year, my own adult children's insurance premiums are going to double, along with all of the wonderful families and hardworking people in my district. What I love is that she led with the truth. Like, wait a second, this is going to impact my family. Oh yeah, and the people I represent, them too. But whatever. Again, we'll take the allies in the fight at the moment we need them. So I'm carving my own lane, she goes on to say. I'm absolutely disgusted that healthcare insurance premiums will double if the tax credits expire this year. Not a single Republican in leadership talked to us about this or has given us a plan to help Americans deal with their health insurance premiums doubling. Whew, okay. So I think McKay Naomi puts it really well. The lack of empathy is astounding, but welcome to the fight, I guess. Exactly. That's exactly my sentiment. Like strange, crazy, crazy times. So let's go through this. First of all, we don't know what's going to happen. Is this going to be lengthy? Are Democrats going to fold? And I hate putting it that way, but we're depending on them. There are fighters. And when I say Democrats, I mean those in leadership like Schumer and Jeffries, right? Keep in mind that when you're in politics, your career exists largely based on how well liked you are. This is hardwired in. And to get people to make a tough decision that might cost them their careers, that they don't get immediate positive feedback for, is tough. It's tough. So I'm pleasantly surprised that they had a plan, that they stuck to the plan, as infuriating as sometimes it would be. Like, they were getting a little comical about pivoting to the healthcare point, but I'll give them the props that are due. They are now continuing to emphasize this point and point out now that they have the leverage of the point, they are using it to bring in additional points. And there's other things we're fighting for, like you just spending money willy-nilly and running tariffs that you didn't ask us permission for. They're sliding that stuff in as they can. I gotta say, I'm gonna give them a solid B plus. The only reason I'm not giving them an A right now is, oh my goodness, it's still so cringe. It's still so cringe. Like, if you're going to reach people, that's point A. And point B is that I feel like the talks on C-SPAN and the hearings in Congress and the media hits on MSNBC, that's great. But they need to be out in the world as much as humanly possible. Like, stand in a Walmart parking lot handing stuff out if you have to. Go where real people are and where they are watching it, not news junkies like some of us are, right? I see a lot of different things. I want square foot gardening brings up such a good point. Like, when your back is against the wall, what is this MAGA crew doing? They're gonna lie. Like, that's their number one playbook. And square foot gardening says Johnson deceptively said Dems are trying to give care to illegal aliens and other non-citizens. Okay, I just want to say first of all that that's false, but I also want to show how the yardstick has moved, because I'm sorry, which is the more Christian faith-based party again? Like, how are we having the conversation that I'm going to take healthcare away from you, or at least make it really difficult for you to have access? Because if these people do not have paperwork, they should die when they're sick. I mean, I don't even want to accept the premise that we should be turning people away for healthcare. That's disgusting in its own right. So I just want to point that out in just a moment of hopefully some empathetic clarity here. But on top of that, yes, it's an outright bold-faced lie. Liar, liar, pants on fire. So yeah, just a lot of things. User 8479 saying we are at the mercy of the devils. It is scary, folks. Yes. Square foot, great point. Christianity is a faith based movement. Christian nationalism is a political movement. Great way to put it. You guys are so good about this. They are barely providing food and water in detention facilities. Good point, MK Naomi. Not only that, taking it away at the same time from all of us on their false premise. That's Monica saying that. Really great point. Yeah, also MK asking disabled people to prove why they can't work, right? Cruelty is the point, right? Cruelty is the point. So I want to say this before we pivot to our next topic, right? Which is that we are seeing some people fighting in their own way. Some of them a bit slow. Well, let's just be honest. Like, listen, we were all screaming at the television these last several months. Like, at least, maybe not all. I'll speak for myself. I was screaming at the television these last several months at our team in blue there. But I will say it seems like they are doing what they can to stand up for us. I'm not going to nitpick it. Instead, I'm going to celebrate that win. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do for homework. And I've actually got something really serious that I'm going to ask you to do. And then I've got something fun that you can do that's on a little bit of a tangential point before we pivot to our next story. And if you're just joining us, then I want to say welcome to Political Fixer Live. And I see another few comments I want to get to on a few things. And I also want to say hi to Patricia or Searching Eagle as well, for your gifts, in addition to the other gifters that we named before. Okay, so two things for homework that you can do, both of them fairly positive. Here's what I will say. I like to reward the behavior that I want to see. I like to reward the behavior I want to see. And if we want to see Democrats doing more of this, again, they thrive on public adoration. It is the nature of the beast. I've worked with many of them personally. I'm telling you, the positivity matters. So here's some choices. That same little phone list that we were using to call them with outrage, I'm going to ask you to dust it off and call or email these people in Congress, whether they are your Congress people or not. I want you to call them and thank them for holding strong and encourage them to continue holding strong. Those calls matter. We saw those calls sway them in other issues before. I think no matter where you live, adopt a congressperson or two that you just like. I'm a huge fan of Lauren Underwood. I'm going to submit her to the committee for consideration. I don't think she gets enough love. So whoever you want to adopt in your team there, of congressional Pokemon, I want you to try to call a few of them, especially some of them might be lesser known, some of them that are in swing districts, and thank them, those Democratic Congress people. And if you're so inclined and you think you can stay on message, give Marjorie Taylor Greene a call. Give that girl a shout out. Another option is you could post social things and tag one or two of them, thanking them for doing this, encouraging them, sharing a story about why it's particularly personally important to you. They will use those stories, that will fuel them. It matters. So we talk a lot about the negative, but let's try to do some positive reinforcement in both the congressional side and then our Senate side as well, the House side and the Senate side. I see Michelle is echoing, I think it was James earlier, that was the Afton Bond Tennessee candidate in the special election. I want to highlight, Michelle and James, thank you for bringing the Tennessee one up. Let me do this. I'm going to make it a point on next week's show. We're going to highlight a few special elections that are happening across the country next week. I'm going to make that commitment. Our lovely chief of staff and producer, Sarah, is going to hold me to that commitment. Sarah, I'm hoping, I'm looking, I'm blinking and smiling in your general direction. So let's highlight some amazing special elections that are happening, that are coming up, that are going to impact all of us. Because remember, it might be happening in Tennessee or Texas, but first of all, we can win them because we are seeing huge swings, huge turnout, and a huge advantage in special elections. Plus, momentum is on our side. But also, no matter where this congressional race might be happening, if they're in Congress, they impact all of us because they're voting on all this legislation. So really great. Love that, Michelle. And to James earlier. So thank you for suggesting that. I also just want to get a couple of quick other points here. So Kelly Frazier wants me to mention that the Pam Bondi testimony today with the Oversight Committee, in addition to everything else, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, if you would like to reaffirm our horrible point from earlier that we need to start talking about, which is that our government is run by a special cast of characters right now, and that's the most charitable way I could put it. I agree with Kelly. She says didn't answer questions and was very disrespectful. If you get a chance to take a look at that, I think it is worth looking at. Why? Because I think you need to see what's happening, but also I think you should have some of those clips on the ready. Most of you are very, very educated about what's going on, but I think this is interesting if you show it to someone that you're having a conversation with. Grab some of these clips on the ready to show that this is not conversations about justice that we're having in good faith. But really good point, Kelly. All right, we're at 45,000 likes. I know that we have already talked about so much in this Political Fixer Live, but I want you to bear with me for our top story of the program, because we're going to do things just a little bit differently here, and the fact that we're going to link together three smaller stories to make a larger point. I could have picked from dozens, unfortunately. I could have picked from dozens and dozens of stories to illustrate the same point, but I wanted to specifically illustrate three types of plays that are coming from the same playbook in some stories that I don't think we should look away from. So I'm going to tell you briefly about the three and then link them together. And maybe you've heard of them, and maybe I've touched on something that you haven't. We're all consuming a lot of news right now, or for those of you that are more mentally and emotionally well balanced, maybe you're not consuming a lot of news, and I both honor and envy you. Okay, so let's go with we're going to start, and again, this is where it gets a little bit in adult language, so I just want to let people know, again, we're getting a little like Dirty Dancing PG-13 topics here, so if you got little ears, giving you a heads up there. All right, earlier this week, the South Carolina Senate, a subcommittee met with a specially called hearing. Specifically, it was the Medical Affairs Senate subcommittee, and they were meeting about a bill that has gone largely under the radar, though this isn't even the first time it's been introduced. This is Senate State Bill 323, known as the Unborn Child Protection Act. Now, I know we are becoming numb and almost desensitized to the different ways that women's rights in particular can be attacked, but in addition to our healthcare providers and others, with all of this. But there's a reason I'm pointing this particular bill out to you. Let me tell you what was in this bill. And this is all of these things in one singular bill, Senate Bill 323. Number one, Now, South Carolina already has a 6-week abortion ban, but this extends beyond abortion. I know that that is a controversial topic, but this is bigger than that. So please bear with me, even if you're not on the same page as me with every issue. Like, bear with me on why I think this is important. First of all, they already have the 6-week ban. This would remove exceptions for, and I'm using some, again, PG-13 language, assault, family member situations, and even when there is a fetus that they know it is fatal, they would be forced, they would be still forbidden from performing anything that would save the life of the woman. It would criminalize someone even helping someone obtain that needed health care, including giving information by phone or on the internet, and it would prosecute those who aid anyone, not just minors, but anyone helping someone travel to another state to receive that care. It would equate a termination of a pregnancy with homicide. Unclear, literally unclear, if that would mean carrying up to a 30-year prison sentence, or based on the way they notated the homicide in the language of the bill, if it would be the death penalty. And I'm not kidding here. All right. So our best case scenario is decades in prison here. The bill would also affect contraceptives, and it would impact in vitro fertilization because it would redefine what was legal and how embryos and stem cells could be used. So again, you might be on a different page with me on some of this, okay? And it would force students to watch anti-choice propaganda videos in high school. That is what is in this bill, all right? How concerned should we be? All right, let's start with something very, I would think, somewhat non-controversial here. You're saying that you're gonna prosecute me if I'm in South Carolina based on the phone calls that I have and the things that I read on the internet that tell me how to seek that health care. How do you know? How do you know what I am doing in my home, on my cell phone, on my laptop? You're talking, in order to implement this, you are talking major government surveillance, and privacy is completely thrown out of the window, right? So that's point one, is how are you even going to enforce this? Privacy is gone. Number two, if termination of a pregnancy is homicide, then how does that work? Does that mean if I miscarry, which, to be clear, I have done multiple times? I have one child, she is a miracle baby. I have a medical condition, endometriosis. I had several miscarriages. Does that mean that after that happens, I am to go on trial? And if I don't have a good paying attorney, I'm going to prison because I couldn't prove it wasn't my fault? That's point 2. Point 3, South Carolina already ranks in the lowest of the low. They are 8th in mortality rate already, with women trying to give birth, trying to have babies. They are already 8th as the worst place to do it because women are passing away when they try to give birth already. Well, now you're denying certain types of care that might fall under this. People are, more OB-GYNs are going to flee the state because of these restrictive laws. And if I'm a woman, I'm scared to call you if I'm in pain because did I do something wrong? Or God forbid that I took a Tylenol. Side topic. What happens to these women? Do we now increase maternal mortality from these awful, awful laws? How bad is it? The League of Women Voters, not exactly the most progressive organization. They try to defend democracy, which used to be a very moderate position. They said if this law were passed, this would relegate everyone who becomes pregnant to the control of the state. This is not some Antifa organization. This is the League of Women Voters saying this, right? The hearing on this bill was heard earlier this week on October 1st, and over 80 people testified against this bill, most of them against this bill, including anti-choice groups. Anti-choice groups are like, whoa, 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 this is not what we meant. Do not imprison women for this. So even the anti-choice groups were against this bill. Now, why does it stand? Where does it stand right now? So again, we're talking about South Carolina State Senate Bill 323. So normally at the end of this, they would take some sort of committee vote at the end of that hearing. Nope. They took a temperature. The wind was definitely against them, so they withheld their vote. And the chair of that committee, Senator Richard Cash, completely coincidentally, I'm sure, one of the co-sponsors of this awful bill, said, quote, the bill needed more work, so they're going to modify it and resubmit it. Whew, okay. Here is why I'm bringing this up, aside from raising awareness, because I'm going to ask any of you, were any of you aware of this Senate Bill 323 in South Carolina prior to me talking about it, right? So, yeah, lots of different things happening. Um, so here's the thing. We are well beyond the idea of a culture war or trying to say things to get attention. We are well beyond religious or faith-based disagreements on what defines, life, etc. This is not a pro-life bill. This is an absolutely anti-life bill. This is a death bill for many women, not counting the prison sentences, not counting what they would do to cause maternal harm for those who are pregnant, right? This is a threat against women, period. And the idea is the state controls you. This is what the state will do to you. The idea is even if they don't implement everything right away, you're supposed to be afraid if you make a different choice than what they have approved. And that theme of fear continues. I want to give you a couple more things before we open this up to even more discussion, because we're going to get a little darker, but I promise we'll come back in. So that's the first of the three-pronged approach here. Like, just draconian laws that are meant to keep us in line. Now, that particular law is about women. That particular law is about pregnancy, but it's absolutely not the only scary law that is being introduced, that's being batted around, that's being used to threaten uh, many of us across the country. There's so many laws like that being introduced. I also want to go over a story that happened in Chicago. There was a 30-year-old woman, Miramar Martinez, who was shot multiple times after a federal agent fired 5 bullets in her direction, specifically Border Patrol agents, when ICE was trying to do its lovely kidnapping game. So here's what authorities say happened. All right. Authorities say that there was a vehicle chase that ended with Miss Ramirez ramming one of their Border Patrol vehicles. They say that a government vehicle carrying 3 Border Protection agents was followed and boxed in by a convoy of civilian vehicles, including Miss Martinez. They also said that she had a semi automatic weapon. That story, that she was shot, was quickly followed by the media saying these things, parroting these talking points. But here's what happened. We rolled the footage. And when her attorney received the footage, this is what her attorney said. And I'm going to read the summary exactly as it was written by Blue Sky follower Jillian Brockell, Brockell. That's Jillian Brockell. She said, claim 10 cars rammed ICE. Truth. No cars rammed ICE. Claim. She, Miss Martinez, boxed in ICE. The truth is, ICE boxed her in. The claim. She shot a rifle at ICE. The truth, she did not have a rifle. The claim that ICE was just returning fire. The truth is that only ICE fired weapons. The claim is that she then drove herself to the hospital. The truth is she was bleeding out and paramedics found her and thankfully got her to the hospital. According to her attorney, body camera footage shows an officer that we are paying tax dollars to saying, do something, bitch, before he fired at her. Now, there are countless ICE and Border Patrol stories that are appearing almost daily, and all of them are important. And I'm intentionally not even bringing up some of the more emotionally charged ones, like the children that are dying in ICE custody. We're not even talking about that right now. Let's just talk about this little thing here, which is these people are pretending to be law enforcement. They are enforcing no laws. To be clear, this is about messaging enforcement. This is about the enforcement of a message, and the message is to all of us, which is don't question us, don't resist us, just allow us to do what we would like, including purging our communities at will, right? I like what Serena's saying. ICE is Proud Boys and Friends. I do think that when you look at ICE and you look at Proud Boys, it's like, my Miley Cyrus and, Hannah Montana or whatever. Like, you're never going to see them in the same room at once, right? Just chaos. Bob was saying a lot of MAGA followers want these people out of the country. um, you know, so this is a question of trying to instill fear in absolutely a certain level of community. Now, we're not talking a lot this week just because we don't have the time to cover everything in this particular show this week. But let me tell you, if you have not read about the Black Hawk helicopters descending upon a Chicago apartment building and zip tying men, women, and baby children and separating them, segregating them by skin color. Let me assure you, like, the idea that this is an immigrant problem, if any of you thought that for even a moment, that story should put that to rest. I would say that when I'm speaking to people who are members of other communities of color, I don't think they were ever under the delusion that they were going to be safe from police or law enforcement overreach. I don't think that was a problem. But for many people that have not really been felt like they've had to worry about that. I think that this is new information. I think this is jarring, right? But let me do one more in this kind of don't look away trio here, and then I want to get some of your feedback. If you're just joining us, we're at our top story for Political Fixer Live, and welcome. There's so much happening right now, and Patricia Searching Eagle says the government constantly watching us anyway. I see so many. I want to say hi to Professor Liberty Esquire, Jolie, Shrew 60, and other so many gifters that are here. I so appreciate you. Again, we're at already 68,000 likes. Let me go into our third story before we take some more. I want to get more of your feedback in just a second. So this third story is coincidentally in our kind of trio of fear-based strategies here. Our third story is coincidentally also in South Carolina. In September, this just a few weeks ago, their U.S. Department Circuit Court Judge Diane Goodstein issued a temporary injunction stopping South Carolina's Election Commission from handing over the voter registration data, including names, addresses, driver's license numbers, and social security numbers, to the Department of Justice. All right. And even though she was appointed to the bench by 47, again, like, we're seeing a trend here. She had number of public criticisms, not the least of which is the Assistant Attorney General, one of them, who said that the DOJ, quote, would not stand for her decision. Now, there have been a number of threats, a number of "we can't trust judges." We had Stephen Miller popping his ugly head in again, saying, that this amounts to an attack against the United States and democracy, that these judges are terrorists against democracy. A lot of inflammatory language that has really escalated in particularly the last week, particularly targeting Supreme Court. I'm sorry, not their darling Supreme Court, of course, but Circuit Court and federal judges, right? So we're talking about Judge Goodstein in South Carolina. Earlier this week, she was receiving a ton of different death threats. The judge was. So Judge Diane Goodstein was walking on the beach. Some are saying she was walking her dogs when a fire erupted. Some are describing it as an explosion. And I don't know if you all have heard about this. I don't know if you saw the photos, but it is terrifying. And let me again put a little context here. Her husband, Arnold Goodstein, was inside with at least one of their sons, and at least we know there were minors that we don't know if they were children or grandchildren, who they were, but we know that there were family members inside. Because the home was elevated on a marshy terrain, the family members that were still in the home had to jump from the windows or the balconies to try to escape this fire. One person, at least we know, was airlifted from the scene, and we know of at least two others that were transported via ambulance to the hospital. So we know that Judge Goodstein's family members, at least three of them, were severely injured, and we're still keeping an eye on their condition. I want to be careful to say here that instigators, that was my Freudian slip, that investigators have not yet firmly been able to say whether or not this is arson. And that doesn't, a little bit of a slip there, but in all seriousness, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. An investigation like this done right and done well does take time. So I'm not inferring anything there, but I just want to be clear that we don't know exactly what happened. Maybe gas leak, maybe the home of a judge who just ruled against 47's administration that's been receiving death threats all week, who happened to be like right there with her family. Maybe it randomly exploded coincidentally. Maybe it's possible. But even so, we're seeing the pattern. The doxing, exposing people's personal information, the personal threats, encouraging people to target an individual when they say or do something that you do not like or you disagree with, saying that they are not serving you well, harassing them online, on television, causing their families to no longer feel or be safe. This isn't just about the possible targeting, and I'm going to use, possible targeting of one woman. This isn't about just one ruling. This is about the targeting of the law itself. When their power can't control the courts, it's trying to terrify them. And the message is, this judge isn't even safe in her own home. How safe are you if you go against us? Okay. So I want to get some comments on this, but I want to put a little bow around this as we really evaluate where we are right now. And I want to say that we try to keep this somewhat positive on this show. We try to find the light. And so here's what I'll say. It, this is serious. I think this is very dark. I don't think there's a lot of ray of sunshine going through this storm cloud here. I think that this is pretty dark. I'll be honest with you, but I will say this. If they are already playing these hands, if they are already playing the ace cards of threats of violence, terrorizing their enemies, shooting across, and we are just months in, we aren't even at a year yet, folks. That is not a sign of strength. That is a sign of weakness. The thing that ties these stories together, when you are talking about a law that threatens to imprison women if they make a healthcare choice you disagree with, when we are talking about bullets that are fired at someone because they are standing up to ICE agents or not. We actually don't know why that woman was even there. She could have just happened to be there. We have no idea. We just know that their story is bogus. When you're talking about a judge's home engulfed in flames, all of these speak the same language, and that language is fear. It's trying to intimidate us. And if you have felt unsettled this week, you're not alone. You are not alone. Things have been particularly unsettling this week. This week, as we go through here, I see that Mark Ramos is saying they will show their hand. So Professor Liberty Esquire is saying Curtis Yarvin thinks they are failing and is freaking out. I do see a number of people that it was all fun and games until it hit whatever point. Like, let's use Marjorie Taylor Greene. So fun to try to kill Obamacare time and time and time again until your children were impacted, right? So fun to say, oh, you have to do what we say until your colleagues and judges are getting death threats. Like, really great to just make fun of the marginalized communities, including immigrants, until you're like, oh, wait, this is impacting people that I know, right? And Serene is saying, the bet they're freaking out because no one is taking the bait, right? So Misha, or forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. What about what Stephen Miller said on CNN? Yes, we just covered that. You are in my headspace. Absolutely. We were talking about the total control remark, the plenary power. We did mention that. Absolutely. And for those of you just joining us, Stephen Miller, we believe, had a Freudian slip and saying, and I want to get the quote, so forgive me as I pull that here. He said on CNN that under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority, meaning total authority. That was a slip up. There is no such thing as plenary authority in our U.S. law anywhere. Total control, being able to overrule anyone at will, is one of the founding principles that, correct me if I'm wrong, going back to our Hamilton stuff, but I seem to remember the founding fathers being like really against the idea of someone having total unchecked power. That could be me just being a solid C student in history. Uh, Tanya Sheil is bringing up a really great point. It's almost like it's about personality type, empathetic versus not. I think that is so true. I think that is absolutely true. I think that there's a shame element, a digging in your heels. There's some I know some people don't love this word, but tribalism that's happening where it's like if you voted for this guy several times, if you're in a community that's like go MAGA go, I think it's harder to admit and kind of step over and say, "Whoa, we've crossed a line." But once you do get people talking, there's these people, to quote what we're seeing online, they did not vote for this. And so that empathy is definitely the component that unifies people. I think that is a huge portion of it. I'll also say, unfortunately, I'm also seeing a healthy chunk of people where it's not empathy, it's the opposite, it's selfishness, and it's like, oh, holy moly, this is going to impact my life in a negative way. I didn't realize that, right? The whole leopard wasn't going to eat my face kind of thing, right? So I do think that there's that, and I also, some people have to see it to believe it. Absolutely, really great point. I want to say that this week, if you haven't looked outside, just joking earlier about the flying pigs a little, but the Marjorie Taylor Greene, admit it, y'all, that's weird, right? Like her being on our side in a discussion point, like that's crazy. But again, I'll take it. Um, if you were to look outside, then you would see a gorgeous harvest moon. It is a moon that appears to be closer to the Earth right now. It appears a little bit longer. It appears a little bit brighter, and it lasts for several days. And ancient farmers would talk about the harvest moon in their writings and in different storytelling. It would be a time when no one could get any sleep and the animals started acting weird, that the entire rhythm of nature started to feel off. That's how they described the harvest moon. A lot of indigenous peoples referred to it as the moon of reckoning because it was at that time that they would have to evaluate what they had gathered as far as food and supplies in the fall and really evaluate. It was the time to evaluate what do we have in front of us to get us through the upcoming months of the harsh winter. And right now, with this harvest moon shining so beautifully, we are at the moment of our own reckoning. And what we are seeing are this seeds of hate are definitely being sown in a major way right in front of us from so many different directions. But here's what I'll say in the positive way to kind of put a positive light on all of this. What crops we plant next, that's up to us. How we come together as a community, as a tribe, as it were. I say, as someone who is Cherokee and Creek, as we come together as a community to weather this dark winter ahead, that's up to us. And courage is absolutely going to be required. Many of you alluded to that before, though, absolutely protect yourselves and your families. Don't do anything unsafe or illegal. Um, but I believe that this light is going to show us something, that we are going to come through this darkness. It is going to get dark. This harvest moon is no joke. I do think it's going to get dark, but I do think that this next season, if we invest in ourselves, if we plant the seeds of organizing, of community building, of smart and solid resistance, of finding people who speak to our values and supporting them in whatever ways that we can, in creating and amplifying media and messaging that actually helps to educate, uplift, engage, empower. If we do that, then I think that after this winter, we are going to come together even more solid and secure. That is my hope. What are your thoughts? Do you feel nervous right now? That wasn't my intent, even though I do feel like it's my responsibility to educate and show. Do you feel like, you know what? There's a lot of bad things happening, but these are the signs of bullies who are weak, right? I see Professor Liberty Esquire saying we can have a spring where we see a positive society rise from these ashes. Serene saying he doesn't look healthy. So many one-liner jokes that I'm just going to behave with right now. Kelly saying unity is key. Kelly E saying unity is key. Time to find common ground. Be curious and talk. I love how you put that, Kelly E. Be curious, right? Jolie saying very nervous. Absolutely, absolutely fair. Patricia, Searching Eagle saying I'm really scared right now. you're not alone. We all have those moments. And I don't think it's one thing. I think we go up and we are like, we got this. And then we're like, oh, like I just want to stay in bed and put my, the covers over my head and just not face anything, not read any news, just, Netflix and chill. Right. So I think it comes at different moments. I think that courage ebbs and flows. I think that confidence in the strength of our democracy ebbs and flows. I think that the idea that we're going to come out of this ebbs and flows, right? That's normal. And so here's where I want to kind of end for tonight. Before we do, I want to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this evening. This was a hard one. Sometimes I come on and I've got all this exciting, fun, gossipy news to share. This one was a hard one and you guys stuck with us. So I appreciate that. So thank you to our Political Fixer family and to our new members of the community to Political Fixer Live. I see 87,000 likes on some very dark topics. So you stuck with it. And I think that says a lot about how much you care and you want to do something positive. So here's the thing. Practice self-care right now. Super, super, super important. You are not a bad person if you need to turn off the news for a little while. I promise you, the dumpster fire will still be there when you come back. It absolutely will. In fact, you'll probably be treated to 2 or 3 new baby dumpster fires that were not there, right? So it stays fresh for you. So I don't want you to worry about turning off the news, that you need to do everything and fill your head with every sorrow in order to be a good person. That's just not true. Pick your topics that you really care about. Come up with your time that you feel like your time's a day that you can take it. And if you're having a rough day, don't. We've got you. We've got each other, right? But stay checked into the community. Stay checked in on the issues. Stay checked in on what matters. Now, I had promised you a second homework assignment, and I've got it, and it's super fun. It's on the topic of ICE. I went to a meeting that was kind enough to invite me in Plant City, Florida. Plant City, Florida, known for its strawberry festival. It's near Tampa, but not Tampa. A very small municipality, and they filled out an entire church annex. They were people of all ages, a lot of different backgrounds. Some that were there, you could tell every week. You could tell some of them it was their first time, and this is in Plant City, Florida. And they were kind enough to let me do a little bit of a training there. But what struck me that I want to share with you is a young man was doing an immigrant update. And in his update about, where was ICE this week, who needed to be careful, really heart-wrenching stories about community members that were still missing, that have been taken, which law enforcement agencies, if you are in trouble, are safer to call. I mean, just tough stuff to hear, but I also felt like very humbled to get to hear it, because you hear that organizing happening in every corner of our country. And yes, that's exactly what needs to be happening. So I celebrate it. But he also pointed out something fun that we could do, which is he was talking about that we need to keep in mind the businesses that are impacted by ICE. A Mexican bakery, a delicatessen, a different dry cleaner that might be owned by immigrants, right? If ICE is figuring out that it is immigrant owned, chances are they are raiding it, they are harassing people, or in some cases, they don't feel safe, the workers showing up. So what can we do? We can support those businesses. So I would love for you all to look around in your community, and I'm going to give you a prescription, an order. Go have that slice of pie. Go eat those enchiladas or whatever the ethnic cuisine is of the immigrant-owned restaurants in your area. We have a lot of Cuban and Mexican restaurants here that are amazing. We have some African-owned restaurants that are astounding. Go frequent them more often. Give them business. If you know of a dry cleaner that is immigrant-owned, shift your order for a couple weeks if you feel comfortable. Go a little bit out of your way on your drive to send them some extra business if they can take it. That's a way that we could all positively show support for our immigrant community, and that we can work together to try to support them in a different way and show them that we're here. Just go in with a smile on your face and try to give them some work. So I see last week I went to Syrian, Cuban, Mexican restaurants. Oh my goodness, you guys are making me so hungry, but this is the point, right? I love this. We are going to eat our way through this resistance, and I am here for it. But in all seriousness, if any of you have ever run a small business before, a lot of times you are holding on by the margins, and any disruption can cause you to completely lose a business that you care about. Maybe it's been in your family for generations, right? If you relate to this story at all, I would encourage you to please support your immigrant owned and any businesses owned by marginalized communities in general, but particularly immigrant owned because they're facing these raids in your communities, whatever that looks like. Oh, look, I got a crown. I should suggest you guys eat pie more often. That's really what it comes down to. All right, listen, you guys got us up to 95,000 likes. And what does that do? It fights back against whatever Lord only knows algorithm we're about to be up next to continue to make Political Fixer Live one of the top political live programs in the entire country. And you guys are doing that. You're doing it on TikTok, you're doing it on YouTube, you're doing it on Substack, and we've got a lot more ways that you're going to be able to engage throughout the next several months. That is amazing, and we appreciate you. I want to give another shout out to our gifters: Marlene ML, Divine AF Girl, Penelope R, Catherine, Patricia, or Searching Eagle, Sharu 60, Professor Liberty Esquire, Jolie, Tanya Steele, and Glory Days. Glory Days, I missed you earlier. I'm sorry I didn't give you a shout out before. Also, Susan Stadja became. Forgive me if I'm not getting that right. She became. I'm sorry, I misread Tanya's. Okay. Susan Stagg, got it. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Sarah. Sorry, our producer Sarah is typing me notes. She's doing such a great job keeping up with this. Tanya, John Luke, Penelope R, all of these, Patricia Searching either Eagle. I see Cynthia's Aldiva. I think it's Cynthia Saldiva. So many people that are joining the fan club, whatever that means. We celebrate you and we really do appreciate it. We go through lots of really awful stories to try to bring you the best ones. And we also hear a lot of gut-wrenching stories, some of them kindly shared by you on the pain that's out there. So to come here to a positive space with all of you makes so much difference. And I hope that you find it to be a positive space as well. Mark your calendars. Next Tuesday, I'm going to stick to my commitment to Michelle and to James to at least include a segment about some fun special elections happening around the country. That'll be something that we talk about. And who knows what lovely new chapters this story of America are going to bring in the days ahead. So next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern is when we start, so we can include East Coast to West Coast, all of our Political Fixer family. We're at over 102,000 likes, which is amazing. You all are amazing. My team is amazing. Sarah and J Robot and so many others. And I'm seeing some really great comments here. I see Nev saying, you're more politically involved in Sioux City, Iowa. Yes, Nev, amazing. So yay, sending you designs and crowns and everything like that. Hi to Penelope. I'm so glad you thought it was great information. Shrew60, so happy to share some time with you. Kizra is reminding all of us to do our homework, eat that pie, call those Democratic legislators and tell them thank you and encourage them, right? Sending some hearts and thanks to so many people. Divine AF, Square Foot Gardening for you, Glory Days. We appreciate you. Make sure you take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and let's keep causing a healthy amount of good trouble, shall we? Seems to be working. All right. I'll see you all soon. Bye.